the whole point of today is to go over the whole regression thing by hand. And the reason I think this is valuable is because if you do this, then you know how to do it, and you can explain it to customers. It helps you to know exactly what you're doing, especially when you're using Metrix. So let's give it a shot. What I was going to do is I was going to start with the same old file we always look at, Gulf Med. I changed it to 12 bills. It started at 13, I think, but I made it 12. And doesn't matter which bills you start on, but I was going to start on the first and just do the first 12. This is my fit. It really doesn't matter even what balance point I choose. This is what I'm going to use. So what I'm going to do is I click on this button here, and this calculates the degree days, and this is the degree days based on my balance point, and I'm using 53 this time. And I'm going to just, actually, I'm going to copy all of these rows. I'm going to put them into Excel. Okay. Now, the first thing I guess I should do is figure out how many days each one of these bills lasts. So we'll start here. And that would be this date minus this date. That is the number of days in the bill. Now, Metrix, I know this is an Excel class, but I'm going to throw a little Metrix information at you also. Metrix assumes that each bill is read. It has to make some assumption. It assumes each bill is read at midnight. And so this works. This just subtract the bill dates, and that will give you a number of days. Now, I'm not really sure what it should be for the first bill, so I can look here. It says it starts on 8/15/1992, so I'll type that in, 1592, and then I could do that. Okay, so the next step is to do kilowatt hours per day and cooling degree days per day. So this is how Metrix does these regressions, and this is probably a good way for you to do them if you're going to do them by hand. Cooling degree days by day, so that would be this divided by that. And I don't know if you know this Excel trick, but instead of dragging this all the way down, what you could do is just double click on this box here. That'll do it for you. Okay, now I want to do just 12 bills, so I'm just counting down the side here, just so I can easily identify how many is 12. That's these ones. We'll do orange today. Okay, and I'm going to make some room because I'm probably going to use this. Okay. And what else can I do? Well, the next thing I suppose I could do, there's a couple ways to do this. I'll do this both ways. Here's one way, and that is you can insert a chart. Okay, so this is my chart. Let's look at Metrix again and see they don't look the same. Let me see if I can make this smaller so you'll see. Well, maybe I can't, but you'll see that this is actually going through the x-axis, whereas Metrix is going through the y-axis. So I've got these things messed up. I want to switch these around. I know there's a fancy way to do it in here, but I'm not going to bother. I'm going to do it the way I know works, so I'm just going to do this instead and try it again. So we'll try it again. So insert. All right. And then the next step would be to add a trend line. And I want a linear one, and I want an equation, and I want the r² value. Now, if I did this right, this is going to match what's in Metrix. I guess we should see if I did do it right. So give me a sec here. Okay, that's part of it. And this one, all right. So I have this 473.69. 465, so it doesn't match, okay? And then 17,329 down here in Metrix, and I have 17,273, so they don't match. So apparently I've messed up, and actually I did it on purpose. I knew what I did wrong. So what I did was this 8/15 date. That was wrong. That's the first day of the first bill. What I really wanted was the last day of the prior bill. So this should be 8/14. So I'm going to change this to 8/14. And I think that might do it. So to get rid of this box. 465.906. Yeah, I got that. 17,329. Yeah, got that. Okay, so that's one way you can do this. Oh, let's see if our R-squareds match. I guess that would be useful. So I have 9,529, 953. That's the same. Okay, so that's good. So that's a start. Now I want to show you a different way you could have done this. So this way, I just learned recently, and maybe some of you know this already, but you don't have to do, the graphical method's neat because I like to look at the picture. It looks better on the spreadsheet, but you could always do this instead. See, I don't know where to put it. I'll put it up top. So hold on a sec. So there's an Excel equation called, oh boy, I hope I can remember these. There's intercept is one of them. And then you want the Y values and the X values. And then you want, the other one is slope, equals slope. And I want the Y values and the X values. Okay, well, let's see if I got those right. 496, yep, or 465, I'm sorry. I got that, and 17,329. Okay, so that's good. So that's another way you could have done this. Now, I want to show you next something it's a little trickier. So I showed you the basics, but it's really more complicated than this. Actually, before I even do that, let me show you something else I usually don't show people, and that is, what if you had a bill deselected and you wanted to do all but that bill? So that's the 1112 bill. Then all I need to do in here is delete the 1112 bill. Okay, and I think, oh, I screwed this up. Control C. So let's do this. This is a 29. And then now try it. And I think, oh, I got a better way to do that. Just get rid of these two. Okay, so let's see if these match still. 17,522, good, and 462.34. Okay, so that's how you would handle deselected bills. You just deselect them in your Excel regression. It's no big deal. Okay, now when you, in Metrix 4, we have this, well, let me say it differently. You'll notice that I have a mean bias error that's not zero, effectively zero, and that's why I have this X mark. Oh, there could be another reason. Maybe I didn't tune the demand, but I did. But it's because of this, okay? So when you're doing your tunings, otherwise it looks like a good tuning. When you're doing your tunings, you probably don't get that, because when you do a new project in Metrix, let me find a meter. Oh, yeah. Well, oh yeah, what I wanted to show you is when you find a new project in Metrix, there's this box that is automatically checked. It's this one, guarantee zero net mean bias. I'm going to explain what that means and explain how to do this in Excel. So in this Gulf Med, we didn't have it checked. See, but I'm going to check it. And what that's going to do is it's going to change my tuning. I'll explain how it changes it, and I'll explain how to do it in Excel. Okay, so now you'll see it's zero. Now we didn't just go and fudge the number and change it to zero. That's not what we did. What we did was, well, actually, I'm going to have to do it by hand, I guess. That's probably the easiest way to explain it. So let me do that. I'm going to leave this extra bill in just for keep it simple. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to calculate baseline now, based on the base year bills, or during the base year. So that's going to be this times number of days. And that's I'm sure you know I just pressed F4 to get the dollar sign. Some of you might not, but I'm sure most of you do. Plus this one times number of cooling degree days. And again, I'll press the F4 button to get the dollar signs. So this is what the fit line thinks the bill should be. This is what the bill really is. I'm going to sum them both. And I'll sum this one, and I'm also going to sum the number of days. Okay. Now, you'll see I'm a little bit off. 8693, 8686, I'm off by, I don't know, maybe 7,000. That is that mean bias error we saw before. So what Metrix does is it figures out, well, what's the difference? So let me put this one here. So this is the baseline, this is the fit line, this is the actual bills, and this is the, we'll call it error. Okay, well, we'll call it difference. It's the same thing, just two words mean different things. So it's this minus this, and that's the difference. That's how far off we are, 7,000. And we divide that difference by number of days. So that would be 7,000 divided by 363. So it's 19. We're off by 19 kilowatt hours, 0.6 per day. So what I'm going to do, remember this was the fit intercept, and this is the slope. Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to change. Actually, we're going to shift this line up or down. I don't remember which, by 19.59, okay? And I could try to reason it out. I didn't get a lot of sleep last night, so I'm gonna try not to think, and I'm just gonna guess, and if I'm wrong, I'll do it the other way. So what I'm gonna do then is increase this intercept by 19.59. Is that was the wrong answer. So I'm gonna subtract, and it should give me that one, okay? So that's how, and then the slope is going to be the same. So now if I calculate the baseline, let me do it, CI, so I'll make it that, and then dig it, and dollar, and dollar. Okay, so if I drag this over, this is going to be the baseline after I've adjusted the net mean bias. Okay, and the actual is this, and the difference is going to be 0. Okay, so net mean bias is exactly 0 now. Okay, so this is the baseline, the way Metrix does it with new projects, and new means done over the last 15 years or so. Okay, so there it is. Now, if you wanted, I guess we could take it the next steps, and that would be, well, let's see if this really works. So I'm going to copy this baseline, and let's see if that works. It does. So here's the baseline for all of my bills, and if I look at, let's say, the last bill, it's 826,410. Okay, and if I look in the scenario inspection in Metrix, the default's baseline, the last bill is 826,410. Okay, 0.36, 0.4, there's a round off, that's it. So that's how you calculate baseline. So, and again, the way I calculated that was I just used, my equation. So I used the slope times number of cooling degree days, and then I used the intercept times number of days. And just add them together. That's how I got baseline. My actual is just the actual bill, and then the savings is the difference. So that's it. I think we are ready for questions. This went a little faster than I thought it would. Questions?
I'm going to unmute attendees here, and if anybody has any questions, I don't see anybody raising their hand. I do have a question here. John, Mark says, ASHRAE proposes a method of weighting the observations by the number of days. Does Metrix do this?
What's Mark's last name?
Mark Stetz. That's Mark Stetz.
I knew it was Mark Stetz. Hello, Mark. Well, so that's, I don't know how to answer that question. I really don't. I've had long discussions with John Cowan about this. Actually, let me tell you an interesting story. There was an ESCO in Canada that let's say someone was doing a third-party review on their M&V, and they were using Metrix, and this person was really concerned about this issue, and so they calculated the savings doing it his way, and then they calculated the savings doing it the ESCO way, and the difference was, you know, like 10%, 1/10 of 1%, or even less than that, maybe like 100th of a percent, but it was such a small number. And this argument went on for several months, and eventually, you know, the ESCO convinced the customer, look, this isn't worth it. It's just not worth it. And so I don't have a great answer for you because I don't even remember the issue. I dealt with it with John Cowan a few times, and it has slipped my mind. And I guess I was convinced by the ESCO, you know, after this example that, you know, it's really not a large issue. It's just a method of, what's the word? I just think it's details that are not important.
Okay, good. Does anybody else have any other questions? I don't, again, see any raised hands here. Let me double check, go down real quick.
Thanks for the softball, Mark.
We actually, you know what? We have a bunch of questions that just came down, John. So we'll go over those real quick before we head out here.
Good.
A lot of people saying hello, so that's great.
And so Marie did want to talk to, she did want to ask a question.
Yeah, I see. I have questions about 3-year averages.
What is the question? Should they tune using a 3-year average?
Yes.
So the thing about M&V, and Mark Stetz actually knows this really well. I mean, he could probably speak to this a lot better than I could. Is a bit of this is an art. There are guidelines. It's kind of, as I see it, it's like pitching. You know, there's a batter's, or there's a strike zone, and you could put it anywhere in the strike zone, and it's still a strike. And so the art is, you know, are you going to try to put it close to the guy or low or high? And it's the same here. So there's a lot of ways to handle this. The 3-year base, I don't like 3 years. And the reason I don't like it, and I don't like 2 either, is because buildings change, and they've been changing pretty rapidly. And it's hard to find a static building that hasn't changed, certainly in 3 years. It's very difficult. And so if you end up, let's say, trying to do a fit for 3 years, you might end up having 2 different buildings you're looking at. You have one that was before they made changes and one after they made changes, and then the fit you end up doing is something in the middle, which doesn't represent anything. So I think the best thing you could do, this is just my opinion, again, I'm an artist just like you guys, or I'm a pitcher, is to pick the last 12 bills before you did your retrofit. That's the best way to represent the building. And one more statement, I know statisticians like more points. It's just that the earlier points often don't represent the building.
Okay, we do have a couple more questions, John. It looks like Mark added an additional question. So I've unmuted you, Mark. If you want to go ahead and ask a question.
All right, I love causing trouble with John.
You
so.
sure do.
But you know that I looked at guideline 14 for some of the requirements, and the IPMVP aligns with this as well. And that is that the requirement is that the savings, the reported savings, should be twice the standard error. So you can go through and calculate the regression model, but at the end of the day, we need to take that model and compare it to the new consumption. So somewhere in Metrix, there should be a way to calculate the standard error of the estimate of the regression model, but where is it ever compared to the savings to see if we're meeting those or adhering to those guidelines, both IPMVP and guideline 14?
You know, Mark, that's a good idea. And I don't see any reason why we can't put that in. I'm looking for things to put in the next version that we want to release this year. So I would actually love to talk to you about this offline and figure out how we can do this. So we have we have another piece of software that's actually, I think it's done today. It's supposed to be, you know, it never is. There's always another bug, but I'm hoping it's done today. And we have the standard error, the estimate. We're putting that on the tuning screen. So in Metrix right now, we're, you know, we have the CBRMSE, the mean bias error, and the R squared value, but we're also going to have the standard error, the estimate. But I think I hear what you're saying, and I'd like to talk to you and figure out how we can add a report that does that, or at least put it on the tuning screen, one of the two. So yeah, I'm all for it. I'm all for it, Mark.
And while we're at it, I missed the first 30 seconds or 1 minute. And what I didn't get is when you're doing these models, where do you get the weather data? Are you pulling it from the utility bill?
No, I just make it up. Just kidding. I get it from NOAA. It's all from NOAA. And then the Canadian weather we get from Environment Canada.
You should share that with some of the people on here, because not everybody knows how to pull it from NOAA. And one of the things you also may have glossed over is the importance, and I can't emphasize this enough, of having your average daily temperature or your degree days align exactly with the billing period. You know, if you have meter read dates on the 15th and you pull the monthly data.
Yeah, okay, so we don't do that. So yeah,
but you
so
have a 2-week offset, and that totally blurs your relationship and your R squared down the tail.
No, that's absolutely true, Mark. But that's not how we handle it. So
well,
what
I know how you handle it, but for people who want to, you know, haven't quite committed to buying Metrix and they want to do this on their own.
Absolutely. So that's one thing I didn't talk about, and you're absolutely right. So what I did was, when I did this demo, I took a huge shortcut, and because I've done this when Metrix first came out, I think it was in like the 1990s, early 1990s. It was really full of bugs, and so what I did was I replicated it in Excel to prove to the developers that it was wrong, and so I had to deal with exactly what you're talking about. So let's say we wanted to deal, the big thing I did, the huge shortcut was these cooling degree days. Well, Metrix calculated that, and it calculated it based on these bill dates. It didn't just take September. It took, you know, it took August 15th to September 12th. It took exactly those days, and it came up with cooling degree days based on that. Now, doing that by hand in Excel is just a pain in the butt. That's all there is to it. Because, well, let me show you what I'm not going to do it because it's going to take too much time. It will bore all of you, but I'll show you kind of what I'm talking about. What I did was I went into Metrix, I go to the weather file, and I copied all these rows. I put them into Excel. And so what you might want to do if you're doing this by hand, you got to figure out, okay, so let's see, I think my bill started here, and then you're going to copy all this data going across. Move this thing out of the way. You know, to the end of the month, and then you got to, and you know, you're going to, and then you got to do the next month, and you're going to do some of those days as well. So that would be like these ones, and then you're going to then you're going to calculate degree days for that batch of data, and it's just selecting this is a real pain. You know, I've seen someone wrote a macro. He doesn't use Metrix anymore. He's working, I forgot where he's working. A guy named Vince Lemoyne. I trained him about 10 years ago, and he actually wrote a macro that would go and take this data, and so you could just put in the dates, and it would take it from this, and then it would do that hard part for you. I never wrote it. I never wrote one, but boy, that was a pain in the butt. And that's what Mark is saying. If you're doing this from Excel and you don't own Metrix, which is calculating the cooling degree days for you, it's a real pain. This is where it sucks, right here. That was a good comment, Mark.
I'm trying to get it in the strike zone, John, without getting too close to it.
Other questions? Well, it looks like Marco has a question. Back to question about 3 years versus 1 year. Wouldn't you risk looking at possible abnormal weather if you only take 1 year? That's an interesting question. No, I don't think so, Marco. Okay, so what you're doing when you're doing one year or 3 years, it doesn't matter what the period is. Well, it should be a lot. It should be a full year at least. But what you're doing is you're establishing a relationship between weather and usage. But you do have a point here. So what I mean is, so Marco, you got a really good point. And this is one, I would say, weakness of this whole method. And the weakness of the method is that Metrix can extrapolate. And extrapolating is where it gets dangerous. If you took as your base year, let's say it was a really mild year, it wasn't really cold like it usually gets, and you do your regression that way, and then next year is a monster cold year, you're extrapolating, and no model is good at extrapolating, and that is a problem. It really is. And I would love to hear what Mark Spetz has to say about this. We ran into this actually, I think it was Siemens had some problems with cooling degree days, and we had a super hot summer, and we ended up with some predictions of baseline that just didn't seem right, and it was because of exactly this problem. Mark, can you talk to that?
I missed something here. I was listening, but there's a gap in my memory.
Okay, so can I say?
We're extrapolating, and you had, go on.
Okay, so I'll state again in just a couple sentences. So if you do a baseline, a regression based on 12 months, and it's kind of a mild year. Let's say we're in the East Coast and it doesn't get too cold, and it's for gas. And then the next year, when we're showing savings, it is a monster cold year. It's a 100-year weather, 100-year storm year, and it's just freezing. And now the model is extrapolating. And this is a massive problem, if you ask me, for this whole method of doing regressions, because any models shouldn't extrapolate; they should interpolate. So that's
exactly correct. You can only predict so far, and you have to get into your uncertainty analysis to see how far out you can go before you can, give up on it, basically. Yeah. But you're right. You can also hit such extreme weather that your model goes out the window and you start getting into nonlinear response.
And but you know what? The people on this conference call, a lot of them, this is what they do for a living. And they maybe run into these situations from time to time. And honestly, I don't know what the answer is. I really don't. And I've only really encountered it once, doing tech support all these years. And these guys it was a super hot summer in California, and the baseline was unreasonable. It was totally unreasonable. What would you suggest? So just so you guys know, Mark used to teach the AEE, what was it, the CMVP class, and weren't you involved in, you were like the chair or head of EVO at some point or something like that?
Not quite that much. I was the chair of the training committee, and I taught a handful of the CMVP classes, as well as developed an advanced class that gets into the statistics. So you're absolutely correct, and you phrased it very well, that models should interpolate, not extrapolate. Because the farther away you go from your data set, the more uncharted territory you're treading into. But if you got into some really severe weather conditions, then option C basically isn't going to work because you have no history to draw from.
Yes, but Mark, okay, so that sounds true, but let's say that happened in year 5 of your performance contract. Well, no one, when they wrote their performance contract, said anything about, well, what if we have extreme weather and now we're extrapolating? That isn't in any contract.
No, it's not. I mean, I'd have to look at the data and do an uncertainty analysis. I'd think about doing a simulation model, which may or may not be helpful.
No.
Because now you get into, building dynamics and a lot of things that are not captured in your utility analysis.
Yeah, that just, I don't know. Yeah, that's the bad thing about, I guess M&V in general is stuff sometimes doesn't work so well. But that was, Marco, that was a great question. I still don't think you should look at 3 years, but because of changes in building usage patterns. But if the building doesn't change, 3 years might give you more of a chance of being covered for this problem, I guess. But I just...
I'll weigh in, and I would say if you look at a time series and it looks pretty much the same, and if you plot it against weather and you don't see a whole lot of scatter, then I think there would be certainly some validity to using 3 years of data just to have more data points.
Absolutely.
But if you use 3 years and all of a sudden your R squared goes down because there's more scatter, then that indicates exactly as you point out that something is changing over time that's not being captured.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's okay. So I got a question from Roger Larson, and he says, so if we input our own weather data, does Metrix work with that same way if we got the weather data from Metrix? Absolutely. Yeah, you don't have to buy our weather. So Mark, a lot of people buy weather from us, and then that gets imported into Metrix, and we buy it from, I don't know if we buy it from NOAA. We used to buy it from NOAA. I don't know if it's free or we still pay for it. We buy it from Weather Environment Canada, and we reformat it and we send it out to folks. If you guys have your own weather, your own source, whatever, yes, you can do it yourself. Absolutely. You just have to either make an import file or you can paste it in. What else? Can we forecast energy consumption? This is from Magesh Dewali. You could forecast energy consumption if you can forecast the weather. And I don't think you can do that. If you're just talking about forecasting for the next couple days, Metrix is a monthly program. Let me think about this. I guess, yeah, you could do it in Excel, certainly. Metrix doesn't really make daily reports. I assume if you got daily forecasts or you think you know the weather for the next 10 days, you could do that. So yes, you could type in your weather into the weather screen, and then you could make a fake bill in Metrix. Or no, you don't even need to do that. Actually, I would do it all in Excel. I would just use the Metrix equation from the fit line, and then I would do what I just did here on this Excel spreadsheet, and you can use that to forecast your weather. I think that's the best way. I don't think you should use Metrix to do it. I'd do it in Excel. So this is from Marco, I think. Marco, he said, I think Marie means that the PHA HUD requires a 3-year baseline. Well, there you go. Do what they say. But when you have, I don't know about the changes in usage patterns. I don't know how you're going to handle that. I really don't. It depends. Mark Stetz, maybe you can help me here. So the HUD has a requirement for a 3-year baseline. Mm-hmm. What if we have these obvious changes in usage patterns where it's very obvious? It looks like they did a lighting retrofit and you can see it. What would you suggest they do? HUD wants a 3-year baseline.
Well, I don't make HUD's rules, so do you sit down with them and try to ration?
No. No way.
What they're trying to, it's one of those things, the intent of the 3-year baseline is to capture the occupancy fluctuations and maybe smooth out some of the weather variations as well to reflect what 3 years of occupancy data is. But you're right, if someone makes a significant change that you can see, that you can attribute for cause, then, if you can't ration with them, if you can't reason with them,
yeah,
then you're kind of stuck.
You might not be able to, yeah, you might have to just
actually it might work in your favor, because if someone does a lighting retrofit and with at year 2.5, You know, you've got 2.5 years of non-lighting retrofit to claim as your baseline because they won't listen
That's
to you.
that's scary to me, Mark. Mark, because if you did that with a 3-year baseline, let's say, and you knew it was a bad fit, and then and and then they end up with some. HUD often does these third-party M&V guys who come and look and make sure you're doing good work, and you know it's bad work. Then what? They come and say this is bad, and it's.
Put it in your report. I'm following the rules.
Yeah.
I'm doing this against my better judgment because this is what they require me to do. CYA.
That's good. That's good. Thanks, Mark. Mark, that was great. Great answer. Okay, so I found another question. So question about the bias modification. Again, this is from Melinda. Why did we do it? Well, because the reason we did it, so let me back up. The first Metrix that came out, it was called Metrix 3. I don't know if it was called Metrix 3. I think it was just called Metrix. But Metrix didn't have that baseline, that make the mean bias error go to 0. It didn't have that. And the mean bias was whatever it was. And sometimes it would be high. I've seen like fits where the mean bias might be like 1.5%. And what that means is that your baseline is over predicting usage by 1.5%. So it's a great way actually to, well, you can't really force the mean bias up or down, but if you could figure out a way to do it, it's a good way to kind of cheat on savings and gather an extra 1.5% that was never even there by having a positive mean bias error. And so ASHRAE 14 wisely said, no, that needs to be 0. You can't have a biased regression. You need it to be fair, and that's why that 0 came up. And so what we did was we added this method to shift the fit line up or down to make that mean bias error equal 0. Any other questions?
Did you see we have a couple recent questions down at the bottom. One from Larry O'Neill. Did you address that question already?
No, I have not. Let me go look at the bottom. If there's a major change in the building during the 3 years, do we need to use a different 3 years? Oh, that's complicated. No, I don't think so. I guess you wanted to use 3 years. I mean, because you have to by contract. And so let's say in the middle of it, in the very middle, they did a lighting retrofit. I guess you could go back 1.5 years, and now you still have 3 years. Maybe it's consistent data, and then you can do a baseline modification to deal with that. You can do a baseline modification to deal with that lighting retrofit. That you could do. I don't know. So Mark, I represent we're Metrix guys, and I explain how the software works. Mark actually is more of an IPMVP and ASHRAE 14 type expert. Mark, what do you think about that?
About doing a baseline regression? In which direction?
Okay, so let's say they had to use a 3-year baseline. In the middle was a lighting retrofit, of obvious big change in usage, but they had to use 3 years. So maybe what they can do is shift the baseline back to before the regression, and it was consistent data, and then they add a baseline modification for the lighting retrofit.
And so you would make the building appear as if it had the lighting retrofit for the entire 3 years?
Yes.
I mean, you
Yes.
could do that. You figure out, yeah, you'd have to figure out, because that should be a non-weather dependent change. So it's going to be roughly a fixed kilowatt hour offset. And
Right.
You take the raw data, and for the months you want to adjust, you basically subtract that out. If you were being really diligent, you would do it on a kilowatt hours per day basis and adjust by the number of days in the billing cycle, or you just do it as a fixed amount. And then take that adjusted data and pump that into Metrix, or do it in Excel and create your regression model that way. And that way it would emulate how the building would behave as if it had the lighting retrofit in there for the 3 years.
So I like that better. So that was William Martin. I think that's a better way to do it. I do, rather than doing the fit that doesn't make any sense.
Right. You'll get a much better fit, but I would also say that if you're going to do that, that you document what you did and why.
Absolutely.
Because someone's going to come back and say, what'd you do that for?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I want to, I guess we're about done. But one thing I want to tell you, something Mark taught me. So, and that is, unfortunately in our M&V world, things don't, we can have this M&V plan and this is how we're going to do it, but stuff doesn't work. It's just, it's just what happens. And so what Mark taught me, and maybe maybe I heard it wrong and he'll explain better, but I'm pretty sure this is what he said. And that is, you make the best decision you can to make the best determination of energy savings. Don't cheat anyone, just make a good decision and document why you did it and what you did. And that's the best you can do. And that works. Go ahead, Mark.
No, I mean, I spent years, in the supporting utility programs, and that was always the advice that I gave to all the other engineers. Said, I don't care what you did, just tell me what you did.
Right.
And why.
Exactly. Don't try to slip a fast one. Right.
Yeah.
Right. Good. Hey, we should wrap it up. Tyler, you want to finish it up?
Yeah,
Thanks,
absolutely.
Thank you so
Again,
much.
thank you guys. And if you have any additional questions or we missed your question, we'll get this technology figured out by the next one. We got 2 months to figure it out. But in the meantime, if we missed it, go ahead and send us the email. It's listed on your screen there. And have a good rest of your day. That's all we have. And thank you for joining us, guys.